Okay, I'm going to read chapter 12 of Because of the Rabbit by Cynthia Lord, but let's talk about chapter 11. And actually, I'm going to read 12 and 13 because they're kind of short. So remember, 11 was rabbits don't consider breed or size when choosing a friend to bond with. Okay, so let's see here. They were talking about the things they were going to say. Jack was at her house, and they were starting to talk about the 2 truths and a lie and how they were going to do that. And remember, Jack made that big dinosaur out of Legos, and his lie was going to be it was only about 200 Legos, but actually it was more than 700. And then remember, Emma had the idea of bringing the rabbit to school because she thought it might help her make friends. So that's what she's hoping anyway. Okay, so this chapter is called A Bonded Pair of Rabbits That Spends Too Much Time Apart Will Unbond. And the varsity team is almost all juniors and seniors, so it's unbelievable that I made it, Owen said that night at supper. Coach says I won't start, but that's okay. Just being on the team will be enough. Enough to make you busy every afternoon. I swirled a piece of spaghetti on my plate with my fork. Yes, that's amazing, Mom smiled at me. And Emma had a friend over today. Hey, that's great, Owen said. The happy way he said it annoyed me, like now all my problems were over. And I knew he knew better. Jack was the only one who could come, I said flatly. When you're done, can you take a photo of me kayaking with your phone? I need it for school. Do we actually have to go out on the water? Could you just be sitting in your kayak? Owen asked. I have some homework. No, that would look ridiculous. No one would want to go kayaking with me on the grass. I looked down at my plate. Please? We don't have to go far. Okay. As soon as we finished supper, Owen got the paddles and I got the life jackets. When you're the warden's kids, you've always got to follow the rules. It's not that I ever wanted to get in trouble, but I knew there'd be extra disappointment if I did. Looking out across the lake, I saw we had it almost to ourselves, with just one canoe gliding along the far shore. Most of the summer people had already gone home, closing up their camps and pulling their docks out of the water. It was so quiet that I could hear a woodpecker drumming on a tree across the lake. I threw my flip-flops into the bottom of the kayak. Holding my paddle across the front, I climbed in. Take my phone while I push you off, Owen said. I tucked his phone into my pocket. I love that moment when Owen gives me a shove out past the drop-off and suddenly it's just water under my kayak. I think it must be close to what a bird feels like when it lifts off and flies. A quick burst and then you leave the ground behind you. It's a free feeling with nothing holding you back. Where do you want to take the photo? Owen asked, paddling up beside me. I want Eagle Island behind me. On the map, it has a different name, but Owen and I named it for the big eagle's nest in a tall pine tree at the tip. When the eagles were nesting or had eaglets, we weren't allowed on the island, but the juveniles had flown off weeks ago. We still saw them in the treetops around the lake from time to time, but they were on their own now. Kayaking to Eagle Island would take a little time too, time that I didn't have to share Owen with anyone. The lake was almost flat, just a breeze wrinkling the surface. As I paddled, I cut a path through the ripples. A little kingfisher cackled at us, flying low over the waves. He landed on a dead branch that stretched over the water. As we caught up to him, he flew off again, complaining. Owen was digging his paddle so hard that my arms were getting sore trying to keep up with him. The breeze kept blowing my hair across my nose, and it itched every time. Finally, I gave up and let him get ahead. I took his phone from my pocket and shot a photo of him kayaking away from me. Approaching the island, I looked at the empty nest, a big mess of sticks waiting for next year. When the eagles nested again in late winter, the lake would probably still be a huge field of ice. It's hard to imagine winter in other seasons, but it's a different world out here. Light reflects on the ice, and the wind blows strong because there's nothing on the lake to slow it down. It roars against my bedroom windows and whispers through the tiny spaces around the back door. The wind also sweeps the ice clean, so clear and smooth that ice skates fly over it. Owen and I barely went skating at all last year. I missed shouting and hearing our voices echo out in the middle. I missed how Mom would put the outside light on to tell us that it was time to come back. If we were skating way out in the middle, the light was small, a tiny dot of yellow in the darkening air. Maybe Owen and I'd go skating this winter. Soccer would be over by then, or maybe he'd sign up for something else at school that he'd do without me. But at least now I had Lappy at home to keep me from feeling lonely. If things didn't get better at school, I wondered how long Mom would make me wait before I could go back to homeschooling. Surely before winter came. I didn't like to quit anything, but sometimes things just don't work out, and it's better to admit it and try something else. I imagined Miss Martell spinning her finger. Move on. Okay, give me my phone, Owen said. Then paddle ahead so the island will be in the background. As he shot photos, I smiled, trying to look fun and outdoorsy. I'll email those to you, Owen said. I thought he'd start for home, but he kayaked past me to the island. As I beached my kayak next to his, Owen picked up a small rock and threw it. Beat that! I picked up a rock and threw it as hard as I could. It didn't go as far as his, so I tried again. We threw rocks over and over, watching the ripples speeding outward and connecting with each other. I threw with my whole arm each time, but I still couldn't beat his. We should head home, Owen said finally. I reached down and picked up one last stone. I slipped it into my pocket. What will you write on it? He asked. Hope, I said. I can't believe you don't already have that one, Owen said, picking up another rock. I've always had hope. I didn't need a rock to give me extra. Do you ever wish you could go backward? Not usually, Owen said, but that doesn't mean I don't miss some things. I couldn't look at him. I wondered if I was one of those things, but I was too afraid of the answer. If I could go back, I said, I'd go back to a day when you and I were at Papa's and Mame's house. I miss those days a lot, the grandparents remember. Owen nodded. Me too. I don't think I'd want to go backward for good, though. I'd miss some now things. But you wouldn't know about the now things because they wouldn't have happened yet, I said. Owen looked at me. Is school really going so terribly that you want to go backward? I lifted one shoulder. Well, no one has bullied me or pushed me into a locker or any of those other mean things they do to kids on TV shows. Mostly kids just ignore me. I looked down at my feet. It's harder to be different than I thought it would be, though. You'd think with all those kids, it'd be easy to make friends, but it isn't. It seems like most kids already have enough friends and they aren't looking for any more. It might look that way, Owen said, but everyone wants friends. Remember that, okay? Okay, I said, though it didn't seem true. I do have a plan that might help. I'm going to ask Dad if he'll bring Lappy to school as part of my group project. I bet the kids will like him, and I'll bet the girl with the adorable rabbit, and I'll be the girl with the adorable rabbit, not just the new kid with the red hair. Owen smiled. I hope Lappy brings some rabbit magic with him like Papa used to say. He remembered. I nodded. Me too. Papa would have a story about Monsieur Lapin going to school. Owen said. Monsieur Lapin would sneak into the cafeteria and raid the salad bar. The lunch ladies would go to serve lunch and find the lettuce bin empty. I laughed. And no carrots or blueberries. I'm glad Dad let you keep Lappy, Owen said, though I knew the second I saw him that if the shelter didn't know where he belonged, he'd be coming back home with us. He grinned. It's hard to say no to you when you really want something, Em. Dad didn't stand a chance. I grinned back. That's because Lappy belongs with us. Owen picked up his paddle. We should get back now, though. It's getting dark and I really do have homework. Did you want me to push you off? Okay. Paddling toward home, the sun was setting, reflecting in our upstairs windows. I aimed the bow of my kayak at the beach in front of our house and beat Owen home. That night before I went to bed, I found Owen's rock on my pillow. Rabbit magic. Dawn, dawn, dawn. Okay, the next chapter is called Bonding Rabbits Isn't Always a Smooth Process. Sometimes a few steps forward is followed by a step backward. So here we go. First thing the next day, I told Leah and Iris my idea. They had shot down my other ideas, but this time I had Jack on my side. Jack and I filmed our statements about each other, but we decided to do our own reveals in person. It'll be more interesting for the audience. I don't like to talk in front of the class, Iris said, unpacking her backpack. I put my hands on my hips, ready to argue. But Leah said, I like Emma's idea. She's right. That'll be more interesting. And if we're holding something for the reveals, it's not as hard as just standing there. Iris shook her head. Let's just take a vote, Jack said. The vote was 3-1 to do the reveals in person. Iris didn't look happy, but I didn't worry about it too much. We had done everything her way up to then. Jack and I changed some things about our statements, too. The frogs were a homeschool experiment, Jack added. My smile froze. I was homeschooled, I blurted out, hoping Leah and Iris didn't hear exactly what he'd said. My new truths are that I climbed Mount Katahdin and I like kayaking. With Owen, Jack said, though he's busy now. Homeschooled? Do you mean you've never been to school? Iris asked. The words weren't mean, but the way she said it sounded like I didn't know anything. I did my schoolwork at home, I started to say, but I was relieved to see Miss Martell coming over just then. Jack came to my house yesterday, I told her quickly. To put distance between me and the homeschool subject, he met my rabbit. I touched him, Jack said, only on his back. Miss Martell's eyebrows went up. You did, Jack? That's great. How did the rabbit feel? Happy, Jack replied. Miss Martell opened her mouth, like maybe she was expecting him to say soft, but then she smiled. And how did you feel? Scared, Jack said. And you touched him anyway? Miss Martell asked. Good for you, Jack. I think it's cool that you were homeschooled, Leah said to me. She does? I smiled. Thanks. Do you want to sit with us at lunch today? Leah asked. Nora has book club, so there's an empty spot at our table. Jack looked at me. You don't get away this time, Monsieur Lapin, he said in his Elmer Fudd voice. You wascally. Oh, stop talking, Jack. It makes you stand out and not in a good way. Sure, I'd like that, I said loudly. I was in over my head. Jack and I had fun when it was just us, but it was harder to be his friend in a group. While homeschooling, I mostly saw friends one-on-one or two at a time, so I could always adapt and meet them in the middle, between us. Here, that middle seemed to be constantly changing and sometimes disappeared altogether. And I'd never tried to be friends with kids who weren't friends with each other before. Leah rolled her eyes sympathetically at me. Right there, I knew I had to choose. I liked Jack, and I wanted to be friends with him, but I really wanted to be friends with some girls, too. And this was my first real chance. I rolled my eyes, too. Dawn, dawn, dawn. Do you think she should have rolled her eyes? Or do you think that was kind of mean? We'll see. Okay, bye-bye.